Good morning everyone. Yes, ako ulit to, ang teacher na nagpapasabong ng kaalaman. Teacher Deo in the house. Na-miss nyo ba ako? Pues, kung ganon, simulan na natin ito in 1, 2, 3, 4, boom! Sa lahat, gusto ko munang magpasalamat sa nanood sa una kong video. At kung di mo pa napanood, pues subscribe na at panoorin iyon because this video is a continuation of my first video. Let's start now the lesson. Let's do first a recap. What is frequency distribution once again? Yes, frequency distribution is arrangement of data that shows the frequency of occurrence of different variable. It is applicable only if we have 30 number of cases or more. What are the steps in arranging the scores in a form of frequency distribution? Yes, correct. It is 1. Find the absolute range. 2. Find the class interval. 3. Set up the classes. 4. Tally the score. 5. Determine the cumulative frequency distribution. And last, we must solve the cumulative percentage frequency distribution. If you're wondering kung ano ang pinagsasabi ko, pues, click the link in the description box para maintindihan mo kung paano naming nabuo ang final table na to. Huwag na nating patagalin. Sabay-sabay tayong mag-aral. Huwag nating hayaan na lamunin tayo ng pandemya. Tiyak ay papasa ka basta may maisagot ka sa iyong module. Our next topic is graphic representation of frequency distribution. We have many graphs to display a data, but in this lesson, we'll just use the common graphs that are usually used to present it. They are bar graph, line graph, pictograph, and pie graph. Let's look at our final table on our first video. We must not include the real limit, tally, and cumulative percentage frequency lesser and greater than because it is not applicable in our discussion today. Next, we must add a column between the class limit and frequency called as midpoint. We must determine the midpoint of each classes by identifying the median. In our first class, 96 to 100, we have 96, 97, 98, 99, and 100. Our midpoint is 98 because it is the middle of the data. We can also determine the midpoint by adding the 5 classes, 96 plus 97 plus 98 plus 99 plus 100 equals to 490. Then divide it by 5, which is equals to 98. On our second class, 91 to 95, we have 91, 92, 93, 94, and 95. Our midpoint is 93. On our third classes, 86, 87, 88, 89, and 90, the midpoint is 88. The process is the same until at the bottom. We can also determine the midpoint of each class by subtracting 5 on our first midpoint. 98 minus 5 is 93. 93 minus 5 is 88. 88 minus 5 is 83. And so on. We use 5 because it is our class interval. Bar graph. Graphical informs represents data by areas in vertical rectangles or bars. Each bar is equal in width and its base is equal to the midpoint of class limits. The height corresponds the absolute frequency. Let's graph now our data. Let's write our frequency on the left side of the graph and find the highest data that we have. In our example, we have 9 as the highest one, so we must range our graph up to 9 or more than 9. I include a more than 9 graph so that we have some space above the 9. At the bottom, let's write the midpoints of our classes from lowest to highest. In our example, we have 48, 53, 58, and so on. In graphing, let's start first at midpoint 48 in our table. It has two frequency, so we draw a vertical rectangle or bars up to 2, then shade 8. In our midpoint 53, we have a frequency of 3. Then we must draw a bars up to 3 and shade it. Let's do the same on the remaining midpoints. We'll just draw a vertical rectangle or bars based on their frequency and shade it. And this is our final bar graph based on our data. Line graph, done by plotting the frequencies with a dot under midpoints and connecting the plotted points by means of straight lines. In other words, the x-axis and y-axis intersect with each other bearing reasonable proportion with each other. By plotting with a dot and straight lines are drawn to connect the neighboring dots or points. Let's do the same on what we done on the bar graph by writing our frequency on the left side and our midpoint at the bottom. Let's put a dot in every data. For example, let's put a dot on the midpoint 48 with frequency 2, midpoint 53 with frequency 3, midpoint 58 with frequency 3, and so on. After you put a dot, connect them with a line, and this is our final line graph based on our data. In plotting cumulative frequency lesser than and greater than, the line graph differs from plotting the absolute frequency in two ways. First, plot the dots against the cumulative frequencies lesser than and greater than. Second, plot the dots against the upper limits. Then, to visualize whether the graph represents the number of cases falling above and below the particular values. Let's write our cumulative frequency lesser and greater than on the left side by 10, while at the bottom are the midpoints. On our cumulative frequency lesser than, we must plot 50 at midpoint 48, 46 at midpoint 53, and 42 at midpoint 58, and so on. As we can see, our line graph presents that the number of cases is falling below. While when we plot the cumulative frequency greater than, we can plot 2 at midpoint 48, 5 at midpoint 53, 8 at midpoint 48, and so on. As we can see on our graph, it is rising as the number of cases goes up. Pictograph is another kind of graph which uses pictures or symbols to represent information. Let's do our illustration. It is important that we must have a legend. In our example, the spark represents a 1 case, the star represents a 3 cases, and the sun represents a 5 cases. If we plot our first midpoint, which is 98 that has 4 students, we'll just both draw one spark and star, which is 1 plus 3 is equals to 4 students. The same with our midpoint 93 and 88 that has 4 students. We'll just use the correct symbol that equals to our data, and this is our final graph. Pie graph. is a way of presenting data in a circular form. The data divide the circle into parts and are represented in percent or actual figures. The total of the whole circle is 100% or the total of whole figures. If there are two or more variables in a study, only one set of variable is represented one at a time. Look at our example, which are harvested apple on the months of April, May, June, July, and August. We have 650 apple on April, 400 on May, 790 on June, 534 on July, and 677 on August. We must add first the cases of every month to get the total number of cases. 650 plus 400 plus 790 plus 534 plus 677 is equals to 3051. Then we have to divide the cases of the month to the total cases multiplied by 100. Example, on the month of April, 650 divided by 3,151 times 100 is equals to 21%. Do the same with the other months. On plotting, all we have to do is draw a circle and allocate an exact percentage of every cases. We have 21% on the month of April, 13% on the month of May, 26% on the month of June, 18% on the month of July, and 22% on the month of August. Then we add all the percentage, which is equals to 100%. And now, let me show a ways on how to make a graph by using a Microsoft Excel. Let's use our data on our pie graph. Example, 650 apple on April, 400 on May, 790 on June, 534 on July, and 677 on August. Then, we must highlight all the data, then click the Insert menu and click Graph menu. It's up to you what graphs you will use. We have bar graph, line graph, pie graph, pictograph, scatter charts, area charts, and other charts that can satisfy your preference. After you click it, wow, it's magic because we created a graph with no hassle. It is easy and sweat-free. In summary, we have four common graphs that we can use to present our frequency distribution. They are the bar graph, line graph, pictograph, and pie graph. All graphs have its unique way to present a data. It's up to you, Dionites, if what graphs you want to use as long as you can present your data with flying colors.